You know what? This is how I believe, okay? I'm from the old school.
Relax, it's old school. Old school.
Bring back the music. That was good. I like the music.
Brings back memories. A very unusual cast for old school. Well, both of us are on it a lot.
No.
A little bit, but never together.
People are always complaining about you never being on.
Yeah, once
and
every
I've been
6
on maybe
months.
2 or 3 times.
Well, this is Malcolm. This is not Thursday or Friday.
You know Dave and I together from the Friday postgame if you enjoy that. But here we're doing the old school together because they scraped, as I said, they scraped the bottom of the barrel. They got nothing out of that. They turned the barrel over, and there they found us.
Cenk loves it because it's relaxing. He doesn't have to have that intense preparation. And he's right. I didn't have to look for any obituaries.
Yeah.
I couldn't. You know, I can't find one goddamn story I want to talk about. Doesn't matter. It turns out I have 6.
Great, good for you because I have
none. They're not from the newspaper, you know, they're old school
But yeah,
style.
we should definitely plug. So Dave and I do the Friday postgame, which we pre-tape on Thursday. So this is being Wednesday, we're gonna tape it tomorrow. Very special. It's gonna be a star-studded panel. Dave, me, and somebody who is, well, it's a surprise guest.
It's a star.
It's a star, a definite star. And so you're definitely gonna want to tune into the Friday postgame to see who that celebrity is. Who's going to join us on the Friday postgame. If you don't know the Friday postgame, you should, because it's a different take on the postgame experience. It's not, the usual postgame is Cenk and Anna talking about their lives or something that occurred to them or some meal they had or riveting stuff like that. But they talk about their personal lives, and I understand that people care about that. I mean, I care about it. I mean, I used to watch it when I was just a member, and I would enjoy it.
Yeah.
When we do the Friday postgame, we don't have the benefit of having interesting personal lives. Except for Steve, who travels and likes to talk about his vacations, which he will have more because he's traveling in Italy and England right now, or was in England and now he's in Italy. And for those of you who follow him on Twitter, you already know, and Facebook. And so it's a little bit of different vibe, and it's not always the same from week to week. Sometimes it's Dave by himself, sometimes it's Dave, Steve, and me. And tomorrow, meaning Friday.
So make sure you catch
all
the post
never before, But you should always do all the
especially the Friday one.
Yeah, but especially Friday. All right, so I will let you go.
So, well, let me tee up everything. I want to talk about Cenk's interview with Joe Manchin. I want to talk about my interactions with TYT fans in public. I want to talk about the radio. I want to talk about, I didn't tell you this, I'm reading Shattered, the story of Hillary Clinton's disastrous presidential campaign. And I want to talk a little bit of a story about what happened at a children's museum that I went to a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So let's start with the museum.
All right.
Because it's old school, you're supposed to do silly personal stories. So I never heard of this place, even though I've lived in LA over 10 years. It's called the Discovery Cube. I don't know if it's franchised or if there are others. It's way out in the valley, at the very extreme of the valley. In fact, the mountains start right after it, and that's the end of the valley.
Like in Santa Clarita or something? Or?
Well, Santa Clara is outside there. No, but up that way.
Yeah, north.
Far north. And it's a kid museum, mostly focused on the environment and sustainable living. They have like a little game where you can do shopping, and you select what your shopping list should be ahead of time. Should it be cost effective? Should it be low impact to the environment? And then they say, go to this section and buy the right detergent or pasta or tomato, and there's different ones to choose from, and then you scan it, and the cart tells you whether you pick the right one, whether it's the sustainable one or the cheap one or the. So that's fun. But the game that I want to talk about. Is it like
guilt-inducing? Like, is it one of those things where no matter what you buy, you're screwing somebody over?
Well, yes. Or it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
It's a really good, actually. So the other thing is a game where there's 4 stations and a conveyor belt that runs garbage. Garbage runs along it. Plastic simulations of garbage, replicas of garbage. And you're supposed to do sorting for recycling. And there's 4 categories. I don't remember what they all are, but there's trash, there's organics, there's toxics and electronics, and I guess plastics or something. Right. And so as the items come by the conveyor belt, you're competing. You have a minute or something like that, 45 seconds or whatever it is, a minute and a half, against your 3 opponents. Who
Are they
can
real
sort
opponents,
the
or are they virtual
No,
opponents?
they're real.
Okay.
There's 4 stations, so 4
Oh, I see.
people can
Okay,
do it.
gotcha.
And you're supposed to grab the piece, and it says for the next 30 seconds, we're only sorting for plastics. Or you are. The opponents might be sorting for something. And you're supposed to only grab the plastics, and you scan it, and it registers whether it's the right or wrong thing, and then you drop it into a little hole. So first my daughter did it, and I was standing by kind of watching her, and she was confused, and I was confused, and she stunk at it, and she kept, it's like at the baseball game, there's a little garbage truck. As you do the right piece of garbage, your little garbage truck moves, and the first one to get to the end wins. Someone would always win, and she would be right somewhere right near the start. And I was getting really frustrated, and so was she. So I said, Larry, let me do it. And I couldn't figure it out either. I said, it said, you have already scanned that item. I said, what are you talking about? No, I haven't. And sometimes I'd scan, and I said, this is right. And I'd say, no, that's the wrong item. And I got so frustrated that these little 8-year-old kids were beating me, and my little garbage truck wasn't moving. So we walked away, but I wasn't having it. I wanted to come back.
Yeah.
So I came back to the game. I got my station, and I didn't have my wife or my kid distracting me, and I was geared up, and I focused in, I zoned in, and when it started, I started sorting like a crazy, the world's best recycle garbage sorter. And then I put one through, and then my screen lit up and said, "You won!" And yes. I was so randomly happy, and the opponents were 8-year-old kids.
Yeah, where you're like, in your face.
Yeah.
You know, this is a children's museum, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you had that.
But I must have made an unbelievably embarrassing scene. A grown man celebrating that he recycled faster than these kids.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me that when I was a kid, there'd be these commercials for various board games. One of which was, well, Hungry Hungry Hippos. It's not really a board game, but you know these games. Yeah. And when the ads, the kids would always be feverishly playing, and then one kid would win and be like, "I win," and the other kids would be like, "Yay!" I was like, who are these kids? This is not my experience. It's like, "I win." It's like, "Fuck you!" Like, we all know you won. Good for you. It's Hungry Hungry Hippos. Relax, A, and B. Why are all these other people cheering?
Yeah, right.
You know, that's the beginning of. Everybody gets a trophy, you know.
Trophy,
it's those commercials.
Participation medal,
yeah. Right. Everyone be happy. We all won because somebody won. Right. So, were you able to figure? Did you like watch the other kids as what they were doing? And be like, okay, so that.
I concentrated. I paid attention to the instructions. There's like a 30-second video you have to watch before, in which previous rounds I didn't pay attention.
Right, of course you skip right there. It's like the instruction manual on IKEA. Yeah, who needs that?
It turns out you needed it.
I'm sure it'll be
once
fun.
I listened to it and I got it. And it turns out on each piece of plastic, there's a yellow star. I wish they hadn't gone with the yellow star, but that's what they did. And you have to put the yellow star on the scanner, and anything else it won't scan. And I didn't know that at first, but so I started checking for the yellow star and putting it on.
Well, so if you're planning the Discovery Cube.
Discovery Cube.
And if you want any tips ahead of time before you go, be sure to hit up Dave on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he'll provide some maybe you can make a YouTube video about it and how-to YouTube video.
How to beat the recycling game at Discovery Cube.
But the important thing is you learn something about recycling, right? No. But the important thing is you beat some children.
I did learn
you humiliated
things at that
some
museum.
children.
Yes, and embarrassed myself. But I won. In life, you're supposed to compete, whether it's in tennis or chess or recycling games, to keep yourself alive.
Or parenting, whatever it is, you're always competing. You have to be better than everybody else.
Golf, yeah.
Yeah, you're just naming sports. Of course you're supposed to compete in sports. In life, you're not supposed to compete with, life is not about competing with 8-year-olds necessarily. Right. Maybe, better would have been to say to the kids, hey, here's how you do it. I won, but here's how you do it,
Keep in mind, I lost 3 times or so to those kids.
That's right, and those kids, they weren't helping you out, so it's every man for himself, kids. Do you like museums in general? Do you frequent museums?
Yeah.
Like what kind of museums do you like to go to besides kids museums so you can beat children?
Of course, art museums, and then whatever random. I like museums.
Now, do you like museums because you actually like them, or do you like them because you feel like you have to like them?
No, I went to LA County Art Museum, LA County Museum of Art, with my daughter a few months ago, and I told her, look, I don't want to bore you. I don't want to be bored. We're going to go in for half an hour. We're going to look at half a dozen works of art that we really like, and then we're going to get the hell out of there. And yeah, I liked that a lot.
Do you feel like you know anything about art that you can explain to her
Yeah, to her, yeah. To you, I wouldn't try to explain anything.
To her, because she doesn't know anything, you could just,
right.
well, this is...
No, but I took 1 or 2 art history or art appreciation classes in college, and I've read books, and I like it, and I do it my way.
Yeah, I mean, I like museums too, but it's surprising how tiring it can be just wandering through a museum. Like you go a couple hours in a museum, and but there are some museums that are designed to go like all day, like the Holocaust Museum in DC. I mean, you can't just pop in for half an hour at the Holocaust Museum. It's a whole experience that you go through.
Right.
You know,
Same with the Holocaust Museum in LA. It's like that. It's channels.
And that's, I mean, obviously it's very draining and it's exhausting anyway, just being in a museum that long. But obviously the experience of the Holocaust Museum is very draining. But so what are if people come to LA, what are the museums that you recommend to them besides the?
Well, there are a lot of museums in LA. They're kind of crummy though. But I mean, the art museums here are so substandard.
Really, Getty?
Yeah, for the works of art there. Of course, you should definitely go to the Getty because it's a beautiful installation.
Oh, but the artwork itself,
it's not famous, collection. But whatever. Why do you have to? You know, when you go to New York or Europe, you can see the famous masterpieces.
Yeah.
There's a museum of Jurassic technology right here in Culver City. It's a tiny little.
What does that mean?
I'm not quite sure, but everything's a tiny little miniature creation.
Jurassic? It's called Jurassic.
It's called Jurassic technology, but it doesn't mean anything.
Is that a reference to the movie
technology.
or
no?
Because Jurassic technology would seem to be a
reference to the movie.
No. Well, no, it would be an oxymoron because in the Jurassic era there was no technology.
Of course. I haven't studied what it is. It's one of the most unique museums there is.
There's also a Culver City I've not been, but it has the Museum of Tolerance.
That's what I called the Holocaust Museum.
Oh,
it's
okay.
in Beverly Hills.
Which is the same thing? You sure?
Yeah. Well,
no. I thought there was something different, but either way, I've always found the name sort of amusing. Like, you know, you walk in there, you're like, I cannot put up with this. Right. No, you kind of have to. You're here at the Museum of Tolerance. All right, what's next?
So now let's get more serious.
Yes.
Cenk interviewed Joe Manchin. I'm honored to have you on Old School to talk about it because you set that up, right?
I did. Okay. I arranged the interview. I tried to help Cenk prepare for it to the best of my ability, but I mean, I always, for almost all interviews, that's one of the jobs I do is I produce the TYT Interviews channel, and to varying degrees, I will prepare Cenk or the other hosts, and sometimes that just means, who is this person? What is their book about? Because Cenk doesn't have time to read anybody's book.
Right.
And what are they promoting? And what are some questions? I'll provide. I'll read the person's bio and see if I can figure out some interesting information about them, some nugget that Cenk might find interesting. Like, oh, it says here that you were an amateur Golden Gloves. Whatever. But he can seem like knowledgeable about the person. Like he's not just walking into this cold. And also possible questions. And with an interview like Manchin, this is potentially combative. You don't know. But so I tried to sort of game out like various approaches to an interview like this. For those of you who don't know, Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia. He's the senior senator. He's a Democrat, but he votes with Republicans more than any other Democrat in the Senate, and so he considers himself, he
considers himself a West Virginia Democrat,
a moderate Democrat, and so they approached us.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And not sure.
And
really
is the theory that because they're being primaried, thanks to people like Cenk Uygur from the left, so they want to appeal to the left?
Well, what was interesting is that I didn't ask why. I just said, okay, sure, we'll set it up. And then, like the day before, the guy who was setting it up with me emailed and said, hey, so how long is the interview supposed to be? And do you take calls? Are they gonna be calling?
Yeah.
And so that told me, all right, they don't know our show because they've never seen. We don't take calls. That never happens.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
not for the past 10 years.
Maybe they're reviewing shows from 1986. The original The Young Turks show did take calls when it was a community access.
No, even on Sirius.
No, I know.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so that says to me, like they approached us without knowing what our show was. So do they not know that Cenk is sort of helping to coordinate Justice Democrats and the effort that is primarying Joe Manchin?
I don't know, but no, they might know that, but they don't know what show Cenk does. They just know that this guy Cenk Uygur is influential in progressive politics, commentary.
Maybe so. Yeah. So that was part of the question. Like, because if they're coming to us like Joe Manchin wants to have a combative argument with a liberal progressive host where he's sticking it to him or something. We don't know what they're coming into it.
Right.
So I tried to game out what some approaches we could take. Does Cenk want to go easy on him and just do a straightforward interview where you ask questions, the guy answers, and then you move on to the next question, or do you want to sort of start off soft and then get harder and harder and get tougher and tougher, or do you want to treat it like A Few Good Men, where you're going to try to get this guy to admit that he's a corporatist and a sellout and a shill for the corporate interests and so on and so forth. And so those are some of the, and then also coming up with a list of possible questions and topics to discuss.
Yeah, it's a lot to prepare. It turns out, first, I like how Cenk does his interviews, and if those were the 3 of the possible options, I think he did all 3 of them at different times in the interview.
Yeah, to varying degrees.
Yeah. But so I have some specific points that I want to make or ask you about in no particular order. I want to start with one that I'm amused by. So Cenk asked him, "Are you a progressive?" Which, there's 2 things. One, maybe Cenk's doing it for political reasons. Whether he says yes or says no, either way, you can use that.
Yeah, you can make it into a YouTube video clip that you can separate out and post.
You can, if you're supporting a primary opponent against him, if he says yes, then you've boxed him in and you say, Joe Manchin, you say you're a progressive, but you don't do this, and if he says no, then you hammer him. But of course, Joe Manchin didn't say yes or no. He said, well, progressive means helping people. Yeah, I want to help people. I don't know what your definition of progressive is. It's actually a totally valid answer.
Well, it's a bullshit question.
It's a bullshit question, but Cenk, okay, so if Cenk asked—
Are you a patriot? That's like asking somebody if they're a patriot.
Right, so if Cenk asked him as a technique, to a game, a political game, I totally support it. If it's a sincere question, I don't support it because it's a bullshit question. But Cenk loves the terms. When he was a conservative, the labels. He loved finding people who are labeled conservative. Now he loves the label progressive. But there's more to it. In all TYT, and maybe even up to you and me, and Cenk especially, if you're not a progressive, your opinion has absolutely no validity. It means you don't give a shit about people. All you want to do is help businesses. And I don't think that's right. I don't want to be the Joe Manchin middle of the road guys. I'm definitely on the left, for lack of a better term.
So you don't want Joe Manchin to be calling himself a progressive?
No, I don't want Cenk Uygur to say you're either a progressive or I don't want to have anything to do with you.
Well, doesn't that just mean he has a very potentially expansive? I mean, if he's even asking Joe Manchin if he's a progressive, when by the vast majority of definitions that I think we would encounter, Joe Manchin would not qualify. I mean, it's like asking Bernie Sanders, are you a conservative? I mean,
right, but if you
he says, well, if conservative means caring about people, yes, I'm a conservative.
But if you ask Joe Manchin, are you in favor of Americans having better health care? He's going to say yes. Are you in favor of higher wages and better jobs and education and training? He's going to say yes. Are you in favor of rights? He's going to say yes. He's going to, because that's the Cenk mentality. Anything good for people is a progressive position. So even friggin' Mitch McConnell's a progressive. No, I mean, he's not an honest actor, but it's all right for Joe Manchin to say that he believes in those progressive ideals. So I don't know why he didn't say yeah. I don't know. This is what I want to talk about. Do you agree with me that if you want to improve the lives of people, if you want to make progress in society and the human condition, you're a progressive. You might take a conservative approach to that or a liberal approach to it.
Well, in that sense, the label is meaningless.
Yeah.
And so it's it's pointless even having the conversation.
Oh.
I mean, I would say, look, to me, if I were interviewing Joe Manchin and wanted to ask him this question, I would say, there's a progressive caucus in the House, and the things that they believe in, and what I consider progressive, do you believe in single payer? Do you believe in raising the minimum wage $15 an hour? Do you believe in aggressively combating climate change? And you can talk about carbon tax or whatever you want to do, means you're going to do that. But you have specific, the label, and then some of the basic fundamentals. With, like, for example, with Justice Democrats, if you say to someone, are you a Justice Democrat? And they would say, well, I believe in justice and I'm a Democrat, so yeah, I'm a Justice Democrat. But if you say, are you a Justice Democrat? You have to refuse to take PAC money, and you have to support single payer or whatever the other, whatever the list of the Justice Democrats has, then he would have to say, well, then I take issue with something.
But that one's defined.
Right, but I'm saying when you're asking the question, you can define the terms instead of letting Manchin say, well, it depends on what, if you mean by progressive, you mean I want to make progress and I want to help people, then yes, I'm a progressive. But if you say progressives believe in this, this, and this, and as policy objectives, do you share those policy objectives and then force him to answer to those? Because Cenk did ask him about specific policies throughout the interview in various parts, and some of them he hemmed and hawed. Others he gave relatively surprising answers, which he may not actually have meant and will not follow through on. But I guess your first question was about why he came on and whether it's because he's feeling the heat, and that's why I went into all that about what I was doing to prepare Cenk, and I have to feel like it is.
Yeah, I can believe it.
Maybe not, but I feel like he's sort of coasted and had relatively easy wins of late,
right?
And now he knows that we're coming for him on the left, and they're coming for him on the right, and it may not be that he said, I have to go on the Young Turks, but I think he's doing a press blitz and is putting himself out there more than he did in the past, and is clearly including an outlet like the Young Turks where he's going to get a hostile audience. But even just from the comments on it, there are some people who are like, "Oh, he doesn't seem like such a bad guy," and he's not. He didn't seem like a bad guy.
But we're going to get to that in a second, because I'm not done with this progressive thing.
Yes. Okay.
So if you believe, does a progressive believe in single payer healthcare, or does a progressive believe in finding the best system to get the most people or all people good health care and affordable and good insurance?
Universal coverage, I would say, is the way of.
And what if you honestly believe that Romney Care, which later became Obamacare, is the best way to do it?
But that's not universal coverage, so.
No, it's not.
So there's all sorts of different ways to achieve universal coverage. You can have it like in Great Britain where it's socialized medicine. Or you can have it like in other countries like Switzerland, I think, I forget which is which, but where it's basically insurance, but the government contributes some and people contribute some, but everybody gets covered, and it's highly regulated. So, but Obamacare, nobody would argue that it's universal coverage. So you can say that's the best system if you want to make that argument, and just because a significant portion of the population is left out, then tough luck for them.
And so environmental protection. Progressive wants to protect the environment for future generations and the current generation. Can you be a progressive and believe in that and think that the best way to do it is to have a minimum set of regulations and let the public, well, I don't know what the conservative are. I'm trying to play a devil's advocate.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, for one, Joe Manchin didn't support the Paris Agreement, so that's tough for him to make the case that he's. Well, he talks about balance.
Unless he says it didn't go far enough.
Right, but that's not where. No, that's not his argument. I don't know what his argument is, but that ain't it. And I'm like JR. I forget. There was a segment they did on. I don't know if it was a post game or during the show where it was a post game where they're talking about NASCAR, and Cenk was saying his problem with NASCAR, and even though he doesn't really know much about NASCAR, and JR was like, I don't know anything about NASCAR, but I know that what you're talking about is not what NASCAR is. So I don't know what Joe Manchin's specific complaints with the Paris Agreement are, but it ain't because it doesn't go far enough.
Right.
And so that would be a relatively easy litmus test. But that's actually, now that you bring it up, a question that I have sort of tried to confront, which is, if you're a libertarian, what is your, if you're a conservative right winger, your solution to global warming is deny it and say it's not happening. But if you don't do that, if you're willing to accept that global warming is happening, or that something like man-made global warming is a possibility and it's occurring, then what is the solution? And there are a lot of solutions that progressives suggest to varying degrees of renewable energy and all that sort of stuff, reducing fossil fuels and et cetera. But what the libertarian, I don't know what a libertarian solution to a global problem is, that it's not just one country that can do anything about it, that all the countries have to act collectively together. But if you're a libertarian, you don't believe in collective action, so what's the solution? And I've actually looked into it some, and I've seen varying degrees of some people who seem not really to be libertarians in this regard anyway, saying, well, we need a carbon tax.
Yeah.
You have impose a carbon tax and then let the market work it out. But that's the government imposing a carbon tax. So it doesn't seem like that would fit with what libertarians ostensibly believe. And then the other extreme, and one person I saw talking about it, who's in a libertarian board or something, was saying, look, you are not guaranteed an environment. Like, you're not guaranteed to be born into a environment that is sustainable and that you can survive in. So we are under no obligation to retain the climate in a manner that allows the earth to sustain human life.
You're right. I actually have a tiny bit of sympathy for that argument.
I mean, but if that's what we're dealing with, then I think you can discount the argument and say, well, we're not going to include you in this conversation because you're committing suicide, and the rest of us don't want to. So we're going to have to come up with something else.
Right. Okay. So I want to leave this subtopic on the point to the audience that don't fall into the Young Turks bubble and the other left-wing media bubble where you're either a progressive or you're an enemy. Except we're trying to find how you can be not a progressive and be a good guy, but that's not what the show is dedicated toward. But I just find it amusing, especially knowing Cenk, who used to be conservative and proudly so, that now it's like, and he said it all throughout Obama's term. God damn it, Obama's not a progressive, and therefore he doesn't say this part, and therefore he's dead to me. What? No, not everyone's labeled a progressive, Cenk. I mean, Obama is whatever he was. He was an Obama.
Well, I think one of the things that Obama, the way he differentiated himself from, for example, Clinton, is that he distanced himself from the DLC and the sort of right wing of the Democratic Party, and he did not pursue the DLC's endorsement, and so in that regard, he appeared to be.
Right, he campaigned
farther to the left.
Right.
I think a lot of people forget that Obama, one of the big selling points for Obama was that he opposed the Iraq War. And that really helped him stand out against Hillary. And because that was, back then, that was a huge deal. Remember when we were fighting the Iraq War? Remember then people cared about that? And a million people dead in Iraq and 4,000 plus American soldiers and however many trillions of dollars we spent. Remember when that mattered?
It mattered to this day. We just liberated Mosul a couple days ago.
Right, but we're not litigating the Iraq War anymore. And we're not talking about how all that money was spent and we're not getting it back, but we can't have universal health care. But we could ship $1 billion or trillions of dollars over to Iraq and burn it there.
Spent like $9 million a day or $1 billion a day on air conditioning or something.
Yeah, it's so. What was the question?
Never mind. Okay, let's move on to Joe Manchin. So
more on Joe Manchin. So I hope you watch the interview. You can watch the interview.
Yeah, you got to watch it, especially now.
The main TV.
I thought it was a really good interview.
Okay, so you
on that note, Joe Manchin, you alluded to this. He was good. I mean, he answered well. Not every question.
I thought he was pretty slippery myself.
Yes, he was a politician. But that's what I mean. It's a slippery politician.
Yeah. And Cenk sort of called him on it sometimes, and most of the time didn't. Most of the time, I felt Cenk let him off the hook, thinking, okay, he's exposing himself as a slippery politician, just giving a slippery answer and not really answering the question. I think Cenk, his decision for the most part was, I'm not going to get bogged down in any individual topic. I'm going to let him answer or not. Let the audience see how he answers, and then I'm going to move on.
Which is fine. So one of the topics was a clean stream rule. I don't know if it was imposing the rule or repealing a rule.
Yeah.
But Joe Manchin was a Democrat who voted, let's say, took the anti-environmental position on that. And he explained himself. He said, but they defined it way too broadly. Some of the things they call streams don't even have water in it. And you know what? He's partially right. I've seen these environmental rules. They can be either defined or written or interpreted far too stringently and too broadly.
Yeah.
But that's an excuse, because not having the rule is an absolute disaster.
Right, and you can say that about any piece of legislation.
Yeah.
And that's what the Republicans criticized Obama's healthcare, Obamacare. Look at all, he hasn't even read the bill, he doesn't even know what's in it, Right. And so you can do that on pretty much any piece of legislation that is, you want, either you don't get into the specifics and you allow it to be broadly interpreted, or you do get into the specifics and then people nitpick about everything.
Right.
So you have an out that you can refuse to vote for almost any piece of legislation if you want to nitpick. But if you notice later on, when Cenk asked him about his support for an arms deal with Saudi Arabia, he said, well, the experts, the defense experts I talked to said that this is really good. Too many civilians are being killed in Yemen, and too much he said collateral damage. So they need these weapons because they're more precise, and I trust their judgment on that. I'm like, so you didn't read the deal or the details of the bill or the contract that we're alleging to sign here with the Saudis, and check every type of weapon and check that against the weapons they already have and how much better these weapons are at not targeting civilians and so on and so forth. Of course not. I mean, so you can use that when you want it. It's convenient, and if you don't want to use it, you don't have to.
And another one of his excuses for supporting the Saudi arms deal is that he said, if we don't send the arms, other countries will.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
That was not part of the good thing. So he's such a politician. He talked about how much he loves his family. It's great. It's so funny watching these guys be slimy. He said, so he's talking about his daughter. I didn't know this, but his daughter worked her way up from nothing to being the CEO of Mylan,
it's a huge pharmaceutical company that does the EpiPens. They got in big trouble recently. They've had fines from the government of over $1 billion.
And I don't want to get too deep into that, but go ahead.
He said she started in the mailroom and worked her way up to CEO. Her father's Joe Manchin.
Governor.
He's governor, and I mean, like,
Good point. And then he said, only in America. And so, can you do this? First, that's such a right-wing, ultra-patriot comment. And it might have been true 150 years ago. Europe was a very aristocratic and staid and
when those slaves were like, we're free at last. So you could be like, only in America could you be freed 150 years ago.
Blacks and women, America was had more upward mobility for some segments of society. Europe didn't have it for any. But I don't know if that's true anymore. So only in America can you work your way up from the mailroom to the CEO. I'm tired of that.
Yeah, but as a politician, you're never going to get called on that.
Right.
I mean, that's like saying, the politician saying, God bless America. What the fuck does that mean?
Right.
But nobody's ever going to call you on it. Do you mean you want God to favor the United States over other countries? Is that what you're saying? And who the hell are you to tell God what to do? Right. I got all kinds of problems with God bless America.
Oh, yes, I agree.
But the point is that, that's like, like, Detroit is the rockin'est city ever, into a Detroit crowd, and then you go on to, Santa Fe, and you say the same thing to the Santa Fe crowd, and the same thing to Miami crowd, and whatever. They're not gonna be like, no, we're not really that great here in Detroit. They're much better in Chicago. That's a easy pander that nobody's ever gonna call you on.
But we're calling them on.
Right, but and the problem is in an interview, if you say to him, oh, come on, Joe, only in America, can you prove that never happens in Denmark? But then you get bogged down in some BS.
Plus, then you have to know. Well, in Denmark, statistics show blah blah, and then
no, you don't have to know, but they have to know. They're the one making the positive.
But by the way,
assertion.
Joe Manchin would like nothing more than you to challenge him on that, because he'll reassert his patriotism. So that would
maybe well, although I bet it would be a surprise.
Oh yeah, he would be a little.
On the only in America.
Wait a minute, so you guys aren't even American or patriotic at all.
I don't like it when people say only in America when something weird happens. Some bizarre story comes out and be like only in America. Like no, bizarre shit happens everywhere.
If you watch weekly world news, you would know that.
That's true.
Yeah. So the final thing, this is more just if you know anything. The big reveal from this interview was Joe Manchin claiming that he doesn't even know who his donors are.
Yeah.
And Cenk went back to that and said, really? And he said, yeah, no, you're not gonna believe it. I know your audience isn't gonna believe it, but it's true. I don't know who my donors are. Cenk put the list up. I listened, I didn't watch, but Open Secrets.
OpenSecrets.org.
All the donors to Joe Manchin, you say, I'm seeing that for the first time. What do you make of that?
It's certainly possible.
I know it's possible. He can't do that much of a bald-faced lie, but.
And actually later on, as I pointed out to you before the show, the guy who set it up emailed me to say it's really true, he doesn't, and it frustrates us, which I imagine would be more frustrating for his donors if he doesn't know, No,
because the staff knows, and the donors know that the staff know.
Right.
So it's a big game. If it's true, it's deliberate, willful not knowing.
It's it's part of his persona that he can comport himself, and he also might it doesn't matter. He doesn't have to know because there are still ways of communicating the best way to vote for your actual constituency, which are the people who. I mean, one of the things Cenk pointed out in the interview is that 1% of his donations are small donors, and 99% come from bigger donors or whatever however they measure those things. And it's not it's like a reverse Bernie Sanders situation.
Right.
And Joe Manchin saying, yeah, I need to get on that internet thing.
And he said it as usual with the wrong word.
As if it's just a matter of his approach and his time. I haven't put effort into getting the small donors. It's not. I've been focusing too much on the people who can write me the big checks. I really need to. But he said the people in West Virginia don't have any money to give him, so it's the 48th poorest, or it's the 48th poorest
Jenks said that,
state in the country. So it's probably not. He's probably not going to do too well if he refocuses only on small donors. But one thing that he said that I thought was really interesting, he came out pretty strong against or in favor of campaign finance reform, which. He even said he favored a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, which, if he's talking about how terrible the campaign finance situation is and the corruption, dark money and all that, and yet he's still happily going along with the system, and I don't know, who are my donors? I don't know, but it's working for me. It seems like you should have tried to do something about it, and we'll see when Cenk calls his chief of staff and says, "Hey, we got an event in West Virginia we'd like Joe to come to about overturning Citizens United." We'll see if Joe shows up.
Yeah.
But
I hope they do.
One of the things when Cenk was asking about his donors is Manchin said that money is a real problem, but it's the dark money that's the problem, not the individual donations. He said it's the dark money that dominates, that affects all, that decides all the races. The individual donations to the candidates don't matter. And I was thinking, then why are you going to all these fundraisers? Why are you even soliciting them? It doesn't matter at all, Joe.
Right.
Then why bother?
Yeah.
He literally said they don't matter. It's all about the dark money. And then I was thinking, well, then you're spending a lot of time raising money for this just pointlessly.
Well, he might say, yeah, because there's all that dark money against me, and I need some money to fight against. But then it does matter.
Well, right. Then you're arguing that it does matter. So but it'll be interesting to see how this race shakes out, because the Paula Swearingen, who's the Justice Democrats candidate, who is authentic West Virginian, her father's a coal miner, her grandfather's a coal miner, and she's been active in environmental cases. She's got a thick West Virginia accent. I don't know if you've heard her or seen her or anything, but she comes across like the real deal, and a person who can definitely position Manchin as not a man of the people, someone who has been tainted by Washington, doesn't care, only cares about his daughter's pharmaceutical company and selling arms to Saudi Arabia, and what about the coal miners here, poisoning our streams and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean she will get any traction necessarily or be able to build a base of support, because I imagine Joe Manchin is the Democratic Party in West Virginia. He's
once Rockefeller left.
Right, it's sort of like Harry Reid in Nevada. Like he appointed his successor, and but he runs the machine. I imagine. I don't know anything about West Virginia Democrats, but I imagine he runs the machine. And if she can't break through that, it's going to be very difficult for her. But if anybody will be able to, I think she's got a good shot, because she comes across really well. To me, anyway.
Start following that.
And presumably we're going to have her in for an interview. It seems interesting that Manchin would approach us after we specifically are targeting him.
That's good, speaks well of him, kind of. It's one of the big problems Hillary had in the presidential election. She refused to talk to the
She didn't come on the Young Turks and she lost. It's cause and effect, basic.
But she did win the primary, so she didn't lose everything.
Well, win.
She had more delegates.
Well, that's true. A lot of super delegates. A lot of them were super delegates.
Right.
And there was a couple thumbs on those scales, but we don't have. That's more an aggressive, progressive topic. You can tune in tomorrow night for that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all I have on Joe Manchin, but it was a good interview, so go find it.
But it is also interesting in the comments. Some people are saying, "Hey, that was a great interview. That was really interesting," and other people are saying, "Oh, you didn't go at him hard enough.
Of course.
You didn't question him." And I think I felt that way to a degree after having sort of been there all through the process of preparing for the interview. Like I felt like there were definitely things that he said, that Manchin said, that Cenk could have come back at him. But it's also very difficult when you're in the middle of the interview, you don't have time to review it like we're doing.
Yeah.
And make notes, be like, oh, well, say, oh, you should have said this, you should have said that. When when he said that he trusted the generals about the multi-million-dollar Saudi arms deal, but he doesn't need to investigate it himself too thoroughly, but he doesn't trust it on the streams. How do you make those decisions? But what about did you see the part where he argued against? He's trying to get his colleagues to agree not to campaign against sitting elected senators or members of Congress.
Yeah.
And then Cenk said, but didn't you lose a primary to a Democrat and then you opposed her?
Right.
And he said, oh well, that was different. I didn't want her to win. He basically said, "Oh, that was different because I didn't feel like she was qualified." I'm like, "Oh, well, in that case, I didn't know this. Is there an asterisk next to this this pledge?"
Yeah, right.
Oh, only in cases unless you don't want the person to win. In that case, go ahead and primary them to hell.
Exactly.
No, all right. Anyway, so that's the Manchin interview. I thought it's interesting no matter what happens with these. And we got Keith Ellison coming up on Friday, which is sort of the opposite extreme, where he's a progressive, but there are a lot of progressives who are upset with him.
Yeah.
If I may use the term progressive.
Right.
Because he allowed himself to be co-opted potentially by the
Democratic establishment.
Yeah, the Democratic establishment by accepting the deputy chair position,
which doesn't exist.
Which and what does it mean? But it'll be interesting. I'm sure there are some people. Some people will perceive Cenk as being too easy on Ellison. Other people will perceive him being too hard on him. But that's why Cenk gets the big bucks. He has to make those decisions.
Okay, so let's go light now. There's not much to it. I want to get. Cenk always talks about how TYT fans come up to him, but he's a bona fide star and recognized celebrity. For me, first, only once in my life has anyone recognized me by my face. It was at the checkout line at a Guitar Center where I was buying some equipment. The guy said, "Hey, you're Dave Kohler from the Young Turks." So that was great. One time.
How long ago was that?
5 years ago.
Back when you were on the show more often. Yeah. So it's probably less likely to happen now, even though the show is bigger, because your footprint on the network is lighter.
But I wear TYT gear around a lot. I don't wear the Young Turks stuff in LA because I don't want to piss off any Armenians. And I'm serious.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I wear TYT stuff all the time. And now I get a lot of people who come up to me, and for some reason, I find it strange. They always assume I work there. Is that a reasonable assumption? You see, like if you see someone with a Yankees cap, you don't think, "Oh, you must work for the Yankees."
I'm not sure if that's analogous, but
do you find that assumption then reasonable on the part of the?
Yeah, I do. If it's a company, I would say even if it's a media company, because like if I live in the Bay Area on the peninsula south of San Francisco, and there are a lot of tech companies, and as a matter of fact, I'm wearing the shirt I'm wearing is Hooli, which is from the TV show Silicon Valley, and Hooli on the show is the equivalent of Google.
Right.
And the reason I had this made and wear around where I live is because there's so many people who wear Google T-shirts, and you are 99% chance if you see somebody wearing a Google shirt, they work at Google.
Right.
Admittedly, Google is a much bigger company, and it's in the vicinity where where I live. But I wear this shirt sort of to make fun of them.
Yeah, no,
it's enough of a thing that wearing this shirt is sort of thumbing my nose.
That's very clever. But now you got to stick it in the wash for a week or two, or I don't know how often you wash, and you won't be able to wear it up there.
Well, I don't wear it every day, Dave.
Yeah, but you're wasting one of your days here in LA where no one knows.
I began my day down, in the Bay Area. I got to wear it all over the San Jose International Airport. Okay, good. And to accolades galore. But so my point is, who wears a shirt or jacket or whatever with the name of a company besides the company they work? I mean, a lot of people, I'm proud to wear Young Turks stuff because I'm proud of the Young Turks. If I worked at Sears or at Amalgamated Ball Bearings, I doubt I would want to wear their shirt.
Right.
I wouldn't wear a Google shirt if I worked at Google, but those people are all nerds and they don't know any better. So, not to criticize nerds, so I don't think it's an unreasonable assumption.
Okay, that's fair.
Because either, basically, if you're wearing TYT stuff, either you work here or you're a super fan.
Well, that's what I thought they would think I'm a super fan.
But you don't fit the profile. We're too old.
Right.
Unfortunately.
So
what did the guy say to you? He said, "Hey, you're Dave Kohler." So he knew you by name, which is cool.
That's the one that he knew me. Yeah. Right.
And it was a checkout, like the guy working at Guitar Center.
He's the guy who checks your receipt as you're walking out the door to make sure you're not stealing anything.
So. That's not, I don't know if it's a humiliating job, but the whole process is humiliating. When you're doing something, when the whole interaction is premised on we don't trust people, and so we can't trust you. I mean, it's like going through a security line at the airport. It's like, maybe you're trustworthy, maybe you're not. We're not willing to make that judgment. We have to test everybody.
Right.
So, so did you send him a free T-shirt or anything?
I might have offered it.
That's what. Well, if you run into either of us,
it's a long time ago,
and you identify us in public and call us out and say, "Hey," by name.
Yeah.
Or if we're not wearing TYT gear, if you say Young Turks, "Hey, I know you're from Young Turks," then that's worth a T-shirt, right?
Sure, it is. Yeah.
I can make
please
that
don't come stalking like in our front door.
Well, presumably they don't.
Yeah, they don't know where we're.
Would you like to be recognized more? Do you think it would?
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. So I was once at a party wearing a TYT hat, and some people. It was a party with parents and kids, and the guy had a 5th grader or 6th grader who was also a TYT fan. The father and the son, TYT fans. They thought I was. This time they thought I was a fan, and it's important to the story. So they asked me if I am a fan of the TYT, and I said. Yes, I think. I wanted to hide my identity. To see what they were
like, well, I have some issues with some of the things that Cenk says, to be honest.
So then they started talking about it, not so much to me, but to the other people at the party. And they both really loved the show. The guy once ran into Cenk in the lobby of a bank. And he was so excited and he was so happy. And then they spoke on and on and on to the other guests about what TYT is and what it means. And the kid had participated. That then I was embarrassed to. At first I wanted to hide my identity just to see what they would say. Then I didn't want to come back and say, oh, by the way, I worked there. So then I felt like an idiot. They're saying all this shit and I worked there and they'd be excited and I didn't want to say anything.
But you never revealed?
Never revealed.
That's funny. That is funny. I've been recognized 2 times. Once, I think I've actually talked about it in a previous Old School, or maybe was at my college reunion a couple of years ago, where people our age, they don't know what the Young Turks is.
Right.
So I told my fellow alums where I work. They're like, whatever you say. I'm like, it's kind of a big deal. It's biggest online. However many billions of views. And they're like, sure, whatever. And then while I was just sitting chatting with one of them, a guy who worked at the college came over and was like, hey, you're a Young Turks. And I was like, yes, I am. See, we are a big deal. And then I slipped him a 20. But the other time was, I was just sitting at a coffee shop up near where I live in the Bay Area, and a guy just walking out was like, hey, I like you on Aggressive Progressives. And that was the end of it. So that was, it's a little weird that somebody you don't know is going to recognize you.
Yeah.
But I guess you get used to it if you're Cenk and Anna and whatever, or if you probably get sick of it potentially.
At some
point, if you're certain people. But it is a nice little boost.
Yeah.
You ever recognize anybody that you approached in public?
Well, a little bit.
A famous person who you didn't know.
You know the famous story when Cenk and I ran into Dan Bartlett. I think that's his name. It was one of George W. Bush's advisors. At the airport.
No, I didn't.
Oh, really? I'll tell the story. So Cenk and I were coming back from, it must have been the 2004 Republican National Convention. And Dan Bartlett was in the airport and I recognized him. Maybe it was the 2008 Republican Convention, but makes more sense. And Cenk and I were sitting in the airplane, the gate area waiting. And we saw him standing there. I said, I'm going to go talk to him. And
he wasn't just surrounded by throngs of adoring teenage girls?
I said, Dan Bartlett? He said, yes. I said, I just want to let you know that your administration did great damage to the United States.
You said this? Or
yeah, I said that. And he said, oh, thanks. Yeah, got it. And I went back. And
as if I didn't know.
Cenk and I were talking. I said it to him and he didn't react. I think maybe he didn't hear me or something. So when we went into the plane, he was sitting in first class and Cenk went up to him and said, Dan Bartlett, I just want to let you know that your administration did great damage to the United States of America. And he said, yeah, your friend told me already.
That's awesome.
And then Cenk said, you shouldn't have let Cheney roll over you.
Yeah, and Dan Bartlett's like, where were you, 8 years ago when I could have used this advice?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. No, that reminds me, I ran into Oliver Stone at LAX, or at least I saw him. We were getting on the same flight to San Jose. And so we were in the gate area and I was like, what am I going to say to him? What am I going to say to him? And this is long before he'd been on TYT.
Okay.
And
so you were on a plane to Russia? Is that what you guys did?
No, this is before we were, Russia was our enemy/ally.
Right.
And our frenemy. And so the first thing I found interesting was at some point in time before we boarded the plane, a representative of Southwest Airlines came over and whispered with him, and then he and his companion got up and left. Oh. And I was like, wonder what that was about. And then they started calling us to get in line to get on the plane. We got on the plane, there he was in the front row.
Right.
And so obviously he was getting preferential treatment, which made me wonder, how big of a celebrity do you have to be to get the Southwest people to let you board first?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, he's a big Oscar-winning director, so yeah, okay. But what if you were, the third person on a sitcom. You know, I mean, where's that level? But anyway, so after we got to San Jose and he was in the baggage claim area, and I wanted to get him for the show. To come on TYT, I figured, you know, might as well take this opportunity,
right.
and I couldn't think of you know, what to say to him. So what I did is I said, "Are you Oliver Stone?" He said, "Yeah," and I said, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And he said, "No, go ahead." And the question I asked him was which he thought people got confused more often, calling Michael Moore Roger Moore among directors, calling Michael Moore Roger Moore, or calling him Oliver North. Because I make those mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
And his response I thought was sort of classic, because he was like, you know, Oliver North. Nobody ever mistakes me for Oliver North. Which you know, come on, you know, who's that guy? He's old news. Which not to us, because we care about these sorts of things. But back in the day, I think he would, because they were both high profile in the media. But I thought it was sort of a narcissistic thing to say that no one would ever.
But the confusion is purely on the names.
It's purely on the, absolutely, because Oliver Stone and Oliver North, they roll off 5 letters in the last name, and you know, they sort of there's a similarity. And with Michael Moore, it's his first big movie was called Roger and Me,
right?
And Roger Moore was a recently deceased. You didn't do an obit for Roger Moore, actor, famous. And so I thought that would. But anyway, then I was like, by the way, I'm with the Young Turks, and you should come on, yada yada yada. He said, sure, call my person. And a scant 11 months later, he did an interview with us. So,
and now he's, I wouldn't say he's tight with us, but Cenk has a line to him.
Yeah, Cenk has an in with him. That's true. Yeah. And so, do Cenk and Anna doesn't like being recognized, though, right?
Generally,
but Cenk still loves it.
You never know with Anna. She says she doesn't like to. Does she really hate it, or does she really love it? Who knows?
Well, I'm sure that
it's troublesome for her for obvious reasons. It always ends up badly.
Well, it also, it doesn't always end up badly, but it has the potential to be bad, because I think she has more potentially to fear from the people who hate her than Cenk does.
Right.
So it's understandable. But I think it is weird. I mean, when you're in places with celebrities, they don't make eye contact. You know, they don't look around and make eye contact with anybody. They just try to focus on what they're doing, because they don't want to give anybody an in to, and people come and want to approach them anyway. But it's got to be awful, you know, if you're, you know, Tom Hanks and you can't go to the supermarket or whatever. You know, I mean, I think there are real downsides.
Right, but if you do
fame.
it in your exclusive neighborhood, and you've been living there a couple of years, that's all out of the way.
Eventually they get used to you, and so, or some people like you know, Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, they move off to Montana or something, so they can live in some little town where they're no longer a big deal after the first few weeks.
Right.
But you know, I think the downside of fame is one we don't think about too much. But but yeah, being with Cenk in the public, you went out to dinner with him last night, right?
Yeah, and in fact, I teased him beforehand, so I'm finally getting to go out to dinner with the famous Cenk Uygur. What's going to happen? Nobody recognized that. Yeah, and like he goes out to dinner all the time. I think it's a waste in some ways, but he doesn't know how to park the car. When we were leaving the restaurant, he didn't know how to do the ticket to pay for the parking. I said, "What? I thought I was going out with a master." But you don't know what the hell you're doing. No one recognized you. You don't know how to park. You don't know how to pay for parking. You didn't know what the menu was. I'm very disappointed.
You don't know what the menu was. What does that mean?
He goes to dinner out to eat in LA so much that he knows the menu at every friggin' restaurant.
So you think he should be in Dutch with all the maitre d's? Did you go to a nice place? I only mention this because we have a calendar that I like if I try to schedule Cenk's interviews, I have to find a time that he's available. And I saw last night on Cenk's calendar from 6 to 8 or whatever was scheduled dinner with Dave Kohler, which is kind of ridiculous that he needs to put that on an online calendar, but that's his life now.
His life's busy. In his defense, it was only his first or second time at that restaurant, so he didn't know the menu.
But yeah, well, I wouldn't trust Cenk to park anything. I mean, you know, you definitely should pre-select a valet, a restaurant with valet service for that, because he's the worst driver. So, all right, so what else you got?
Well, I don't want to do the whole thing. I have a whole thing on radio. I want to wrap this up. So I just want to say one thing, in case there are any radio programmers, news radio programmers listening. I can't stand on local news radio when the weather report comes on and they say things like, the temperature tomorrow is going to be hotter, or the temperature tomorrow is going to be colder. It drives me fucking crazy. So if you program news radio, how many of you are left in the country? 72 of you, and maybe want to use a TYT member. Stop that crap. Temperature is either high or low. Hot or cold is the way we describe the temperature. But temperatures are not hotter, they're higher or lower.
You can't have hot temperatures?
No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, you're right, I guess.
Temperature is a measure, and it can be high or it can be low, and that's a relative term, but we get that.
It's interesting that you're, I guess you never know what's gonna bug people.
Yeah, that bugs me.
Because for me, my pet peeve on the radio, or any sort of announcer that I hear, is the pronunciation of the name of the second month of the year. That a lot of people think it rhymes with the name of the first month of the year, which it does not. It's January, February.
Well, yeah, that's hard to pronounce.
There are lots of words that are hard to pronounce, Dave. Doesn't mean you get, does that mean you don't have to pronounce them correctly? There's an R there, it's not silent. And eventually I know it's going to be all February, and I'm just gonna give up, but I'm going to be one of the stalwarts who's holding on to
We talked
February.
about that in a Friday postgame show about modifications to English language. You're generally in favor of being loose.
Listen, these are all these are all arbitrary.
Yeah.
But that's one that does bug me. I mean, you can't control what bugs you and what doesn't. That's one that does bug me.
So on the weather front, there's another one that weather front.
Hey.
See, I'm better than Michael Shore. So sometimes they'll say, the weather reports are such crap and useless in Southern California.
Yeah.
So they'll say there's a 20 to 40% chance of rain tomorrow, depending on where you live. Well, what the hell is that? So is it 20 or is it 40? And what do you mean? So tell me what it is where I live. Not depending on, it's 0 depending on where you live, or 100.
Yeah.
I don't. It is a completely useless, a nearly useless statement.
Well,
and they do that all the time with snow, with rain.
Well, weather reports in California in general, coming from a place where the weather changes, they are mostly pointless because it's almost always sunny. I mean, the weather is almost always perfect. Yeah, sometimes it rains, but it never snows. And like where I live in the Bay Area, have I mentioned I live in the Bay Area? They talk about the fog a lot. Oh, the fog's gonna roll in at this time, or the fog will burn off by such and such time. And this is not really weather. I mean, fog, most of us are not gonna see the fog because we're not along the coast. But it's something they can talk about, because otherwise it's just what the meteorologist is doing there, eating up 5 minutes of the local news time is, we're all at a loss as to what is the point of this. So, but in general, weather reports in California are bad. And then you're talking about, they're covering LA. You got the huge LA basin they're talking about.
Yeah.
And what's going on up in the Grapevine versus what's going down down in San Juan Capistrano, or it's going to be 130 degrees in Bakersfield, but
72 in Santa Monica.
Right. So they're trying to cover too much anyway, and it's not worth your time, I would agree.
Yeah, well, I get angry. And so I have more to say about the radio. That's a teaser for a future old school or Friday postgame.
What are your other beefs about the radio, Dave? I guess we're gonna have to tune in.
And some are
next
not
time.
beefs. Some
are.
I'm sad about radio.
Does anybody listen to the radio anymore?
That's the point.
I'll tell you what I'm sad about the radio, which is something that's being lost, I think, on younger generations, and it's not their fault. But we live in such an on-demand culture that people don't listen to the radio very much anyway, or less and less than they used to. You listen to your own music that you program and so on and so forth. And the way you're exposed to new music is not through hearing it on the radio the way it used to be. And although we're such fuddy-duddies, I don't know about you, but if I'm gonna listen to the radio, I prefer to listen to an oldies or classic rock or 80s station anyway.
Hear any new songs?
But no, it's a mix. But there's a great feeling about a song coming on the radio that's like, oh, that's a great song, I love that song, that you didn't program in for it to come on.
Definitely spontaneity, and maybe you haven't heard it in a few months or years.
Right, it's like this serendipitous moment of like, oh yeah, that reminds me of something exactly I haven't heard in a long time, and you never get that when, oh, I haven't heard that since the last time my iPod shuffled through it.
Yeah, right.
So. That's, and the same thing is true of when you're sort of sitting down, you're flipping through the channels and you see, oh, Uncle Buck is on, I love that movie. If everything is pre-programmed and you can get whatever you want on demand, and yet I would never go and say, oh, Netflix, let's play Uncle Buck. So, although I'm a parent now and I don't have time to be sitting around watching, movies from the 80s when they come on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday.
Right.
But nevertheless, that is something that I think that experience that is being lost on younger generations.
There is, and AM radio is another topic. That's been lost for a long time. But all right, let me just say,
it's been given over to the right wing and Christians and like
like
Vietnamese stations.
Yeah, right, in Korea. So I was not a big tinker when I was a kid. My older brother was, but I was fascinated by AM radio at night. You can get stations from much farther away because of the way the atmosphere works. And radio waves bouncing off it and all. I thought so excited by and thrilled by it. You tune it in and you're living in New Jersey and you're getting a station from Washington or Chicago and you can hear. I thought that was so cool. But the kids these days, I wasn't into ham radio or CB or anything, but that was fun. Discovering the world of AM radio. No kids are growing up with that anymore.
Although nowadays you can listen to any station you want anywhere from anywhere in the world, so that's sort of a trade-off.
Right, it's a trade-off. But the thrill, the serendipity, the thrill of discovery, the unexpected, it's gone. In that, I hope the kids are getting the thrill in serendipity and discovery in other ways, healthy ways.
They have Snapchat and emojis. There are things that they've got that they have. Hookup culture. They got a lot of things we didn't have, Dave.
Yeah, oh, great. Okay, well, I think we're wrapping up.
All right, well, I hope this was tolerable since, jank, it's not as good, I know. But Dave and I don't know what we're doing here on Old School, and we're winging it. So we hope you had a good time.
We're going to find out.
I enjoyed my time with Dave. This is actually one of the things that I miss about the old days of TYT is like you and Tom Hank or whatever would just sort of happen by wherever I was sitting, and we would just start talking. I mean, there was a lot more talk, I think, outside of the show, about hot topics in the news and us sort of debating them and banding them about because it wasn't this big company where everybody's got their discrete job that they're just doing. They're focused on editing
well, and
this
Mike,
pop
I'm
trigger.
just too.
And you're too busy.
Too much stuff they do, and people depend on it. It's money. It's checks. People want to get paid. Yeah, can't.
This is what you signed up for? Like when you signed up with Jank like 15 years ago, or however long it was, when you said, yeah, well, let's do this?
No, I didn't sign up for it, but I'm glad to do it because it's mine, because it's ours, because it's when I'm giving the check, it's not to employee number 2035, it's to Bart or whatever.
It's true, when your guy hands out the checks, you get very popular.
Yeah.
So that's one way, and I'm sure it wasn't working for you in high school, so now, might as well be now, right?
Right, yeah. So, all right. What do you do to sign off from Old School? You thank people for being members?
I don't know if it's really old school. I would start complaining about my back.
All right.
Yeah, no, thank you for being members. We really do appreciate your membership and your support for the show. It's all about you guys, and we love to do it for you, even if it only is Dave and me. But other weeks it's better. So you can look for it. Next week, Jank will be back. Don't have to worry. You can put this all out of your memory. And but we thank you for being members. Do watch the Friday post game and all post games, and encourage your friends and family to sign up for membership too. The holiday season's right around the corner, Dave.
Sure.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate it.